our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there. Hi, 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 hi.
And hopefully we got this good. I noticed that it started recording slowly. You know, when we talk on certain subjects, all sorts of weird things happen. And, you know, what can we do? We don't have the technology that some of these global groups have, that's for sure. And it's hard to fight certain forces. It was hard for people to fight against NAZI Germany from within during the 1930s and then into the early 1940s. And one thing that I want to bring up is many people were fooled. And, you know, there are many people that still view history as being his story, which is that is the case. You know, history is written by the victors. So we don't always know all the truths. But one thing you can do if you develop your ability to read energy is tell just right off intentions. And I know if Cindy or I and so many people that we know were in Germany at this time period, we would have known these are people to be aware of, to tread cautiously around. They don't have the best intentions. You could just see the evil that comes off of them. And, you know, we could see that in the leadership that's out there today, too, as they, you know, try to give a certain impression. But read energy. Just look, feel. What do you feel? Does looking at a certain person turn your stomach, not because maybe of a declaration of a certain line of thought, you know, like, hey, I heard that person talk once and they're a jerk, I don't trust them. More that, like, that inner knowing. We have to develop the inner knowing in these times, that discernment, true discernment.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and understanding that a lot of these people in these higher places, they're doing things out of their hardcore belief system, and they're going to do them to the best of their ability. And look at where they're at. They're not going to fail. So they have a lot of determination coming out of them doing what they're doing.
So the Reichstag fire was a dramatic arson attack that occurred on February 27th, 1933.
Ah.
Big year, 33. Yeah, that was the year, too, that the original King Kong movie came about. Interesting, yeah. You know, and King Kong ended up on top of the Empire State Building there. This burned the building that housed the Reichstag, which was the German parliament in Berlin. Claiming the fire was part of a communist attempt to overthrow the government, the newly named Reich Chancellor Adolf Hitler used the fire as an excuse to seize absolute power in Germany, paving the way for the rise of his Nazi regime. So there was infighting between the communists and the Nazis and National Socialists for years. I mean, literal fighting too, out in the streets fighting, as well as fighting for the votes of the people and trying to get the people behind them. By the late 20s, Hitler and his Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Party were gaining strength due to popular dissatisfaction with the ruling Weimar Republic. Germany's economic woes in the early 1930s threw the government into further chaos, and President Paul von Hindenburg forced to replace several chancellors within a short time period. In late 33 of January, hoping to make an alliance with the Nazis against more left-wing opponents, Hindenburg reluctantly asked Hitler to serve as chancellor, and the rest is history. You know, and I think Star Wars did a great job of showing the Nazi-esque rise to power of an individual playing everything from the inside and, creating these events in order to create a line of dominoes that would fall as the timeline progressed. And here we see from the DC Police Department, suspect in custody. What suspect? Well, there was an active BOMB threat situation near the Library of Congress. And so all clear has been stated, as you see here now. This is the man that's in custody. His name is Floyd Ray Roseberry of Grover, North Carolina. The area had been evacuated. Snipers had been called in. He makes a statement and talks about that he's there along with 4 others that are roaming the area, basically saying the South is here. Now, as we've been saying, and as I've been saying since before Cindy was with me, there's steps to this. There's obvious steps to this. Now, this is where we have to learn from history and develop discernment. When Oklahoma City happened, something felt really off to me. And almost to the point, and I was like working 60 hours a week. I was in the corporate world, but I still had that kind of discernment where something was way off. I didn't believe the official storyline. And what's happening now is exactly what we've said. It's going to end up being the dissolution of the country as we know it. That's kind of in an inevitable timeline, one way or another. Now, it feels like the chances of the U.S. staying together, well, the only chance would be through pure force. Mm-hmm. That's really the only chance, through pure force, where, just like we had before, one power structure clamps down to such a degree that the other is null and void. But still, I don't see any way there wouldn't be some sort of resistance even to that. And it might manifest in many different ways. And again, if we're talking about ascension and, what do we do as individuals, the individual path to ascension is always open. And that's all about, developing the spiritual side, recognizing that you are finding yourself in a way in a holographic 3D virtual reality game that's testing your very soul, testing you to the highest degree of what decisions are you going to make. Wow, these are not easy questions, not at all. And I go back to the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita part of the Mahabharata, where Krishna is talking to Arjuna. And, I've said this before, and there's many people that have studied Christianity and studied the Mahabharata and Hinduism, Vaishnavism, and have not been able to reconcile. How can we say Krishna consciousness, Krishna is thought to be a avatar of Vishnu, which is the preserving force of the universe. How can he tell Arjuna, you have to fight, when Christ says you must turn the other cheek? It feels irreconcilable, does it not?
Well, yeah, it does. And this is where soul searching and coming up with your own spiritual practice, understanding where are you in the case of everything, because what really matters is what you think, what you feel.
Well, every action causes basically a chain reaction of other actions that come. So, something that comes out of hatred and anger and fear tends to develop more of the same until, there's an absolute victor on one side or the other. The forces that are opposing us truly, they're masters at getting us to fight ourselves. We fight ourselves for them. So we have to not give in to fighting ourselves. So what does that look like? When I had asked in meditation and in a altered state, naturally induced, Yeshua, I gave him that question and I said it just like that. I said, Krishna tells us this in the Bhagavad Gita, that sometimes you have to fight. And again, this time frame that we're talking about was basically the time frame when the beings that I would call the Asuras, which I believe, and I've gotten from the guides that were on track with that, they equate to the Anunnaki and the Gigi forces that came onto the planet that gave us the system that we have now as we devolved. We really devolved into a dark age, because also when you look at the Hindu line of thought, Sri Yugaswar, who was Yogananda's teacher, and Yogananda was the first to really bring yoga to the Western mind in mass. He times the beginning of the Kali Yuga with the departure of Krishna, who was one of those beings that was guiding humanity on the path of light and balance. It is about balance in this dualistic world that we have right now, that we see ourselves in. And so, it's with the leaving of Krishna that we descend into the Kali Yuga, where all we have as far as the power structure is the darkness, is basically these forces of what we would call asuras in Hinduism, or you might call demonic energies, in the Western tradition. They were all that's left. And they control, and they have given us the system that we are in. Again, look to the Tower of Babel. Hey, humanity is united. We can't have this. Let us go down there, confuse their languages, split them up into different groups, small groups that are easy to maneuver, have them constantly fighting amongst each other, so then we don't have to really worry about them. They will basically take care of themselves. And even the ones that we see on TV that look to be so powerful and look to have so much wealth and influence, don't think they wouldn't be sacrificed in a second by the true powers that be.
They would too. Those are things that we got to keep into consideration and remember.
So, what Yeshua told me was to put yourself into the place of the apparent opposition. Really look at their mind, heart, and motivations. And again, when we do that, they're driven by fear. What drives a person to have hundreds of billions of dollars? It's fear, plain and simple. We might say greed, but ultimately it's fear. It's fear of needing and wanting. Well, I'm worth 70 billion. I need to be at 3 digits in the billions. Maybe if I get to 100 billion, maybe 150 billion, maybe more, maybe more. Maybe I have to be the most powerful individual on the planet. It's all fear based. And one of the greatest sermons I ever listened to was on an Easter morning at a Lutheran church, I'd say about 13, 14 years ago now. And it was all about the fact that the opposite of love is not hate, it's fear. And it's by fear that we're controlled in this world. It's by fear that the Nazis came to power. It's by fear that the ruling system in place right now is controlling us. And, they are intentionally backing people into corners. Think about this, a wounded dog that's been beaten so many times by its master that it no longer trusts any humans, even a human that wants to come and unleash it. Well, that human's likely to get bit because that dog is just too full of fear.
And it's really sad. And just, for your own personal experiment, sit back and watch people who are in fear. What are they doing? They're always looking for answers. They're looking for a solution to what frightens them. And look who usually has these solutions.
So the man that claimed he had a bomb in his truck outside the Library of Congress had a message for the current administration's leader, JB there. The revolution is on. It's here. If you blow my truck up, it's on you, Joe. I'm ready to die for the cause. He continued, if you do anything to save one life, even one life, you said you do it. Well, here's your chance. I want to go home to see my wife. If you want to shoot me and take a chance of blowing up 2.5 city blocks because that toolbox is full of ammonium nitrate, well, I'm telling you, bud, the South's here. There's 5 of us spread across your little DC party here. And so, this sounds like a desperate person that sees writing on the wall and is lashing out in the only way that he can view to lash out. And, again, now we're told there's 4 others And we talked about that Reichstag fire. Well, the line of thinking is, who really started it? Who really started it? Well, let's look at our history. Who benefited? Who gained control? Who gained power? NYPD gives all clear after Times Square bomb scare. This was happening basically concurrently. Conditions in the Times Square area have returned to normal. Vehicular and pedestrian traffic have resumed. Thank you. That's NYPD Manhattan South after a suspicious package. And so situation was cleared. So we dodged some bullets today, apparently, but that doesn't mean anything. Look at the bigger scheme of things and look at the conditioning that we're always being hit with. So what does this mean? Well, New York, DC, these are two of the power hubs of the power center in the US of A. And it wouldn't surprise us now if something else happened. And again, who is going to apparently be the cause of whatever happens, even though, perhaps it's not related and perhaps, it's not the cause. But now there's this perception in people's minds expecting because, unfortunately, still the masses are sleepwalking sheeple zombies. And perhaps because of certain conditions becoming more zombified and more sheepalized to use these terms every single day. There are so many random acts of craziness occurring out there, and I'm hearing it from everywhere. Just people appear to be losing their wits, let's just say that. And a lot of it's just the factor of the lockdown and everything going on in the globe. Many people can feel that there's a global conflict building. Many people are now being faced with crushing economic conditions, wondering how they're going to put things together. When the Great Depression hit, there are people jumping off of roofs on buildings and bridges left and right. And here we see we do not consent. San Diego resident goes viral after sharp-tongued speech board of supervisors meeting. I had watched this earlier, but they brought this up again. There are some people that can read between the lines clearly, and of course they're made to appear to be crazy, and many people, and perhaps the way that certain people want to portray them. But giving it straight and plain, this lady really, really just, she digs in nicely to them. People are getting it. People are getting it. But then again, look at the power structure that we are going against. And this really hit me too. Quinnipiac University, because this is back in my home area. Students at Connecticut's Quinnipiac University would be fined up to $2,275 and lose internet access if they fail to comply with the university's policies regarding the plague upon the land. Wow, because this is not like a Yale. This is not like a Harvard. This is where you go if you can't go to any of the big, places because you're just a normal person that's not making a ton of money. And, this is your only choice. Sort of. I mean, it's still a good school. I'm not saying it's not a good school. I'm just saying that $2,275 is a big fine for most of the people that are probably going to this school. And so, how would I view it? I would transfer, but that's me. Everybody is still hopefully entitled to your opinion, even if you can't speak it anymore. GOP governors embraced certain cocktails over masks and are offering it actually freely, and it is very expensive in Florida, Missouri, and Texas. Millions of dollars in antibody treatments for people that are suffering with systems that they're going to give you. There's there's a huge war going on here. Many of you can see this, and of our regular viewers, I think 99% see it, without a doubt, maybe 99.9. But then still, our minds are always boggled when we hear something come from somebody, and we're like, really? It's just amazing the choices we'll make, and to go on that biblical end again, which again, I get people that are very confused sometimes saying, why do you quote the Bible when you don't trust it? I don't trust it because it's structured in such a way that it's been controlled by the powers that be. King James, 33rd degree Mason, and the head of all the Masonic churches in what was England and Scotland at that time. He was the head, an insider's insider. And when we look at who put the Bible together in the first place, it was all basically because it was commissioned to be put together by Constantine the Great, the Roman emperor. So there was a question, which biblical text which Bible is the best version for me to read then? I would say read everything they burned first. Instead of reading what's out there in every single hotel room all across the United States, those are Gideons, but any of them, instead of reading what this, number 46 put his hands on to swear in, same thing with number 45, same thing with Obama, same thing with the Clintons, same thing with the Bushes. They eagerly put their hands on it to swear in. Read the stuff that was burned. Read the stuff that was called heretical, which now we have some copies, in the Nag Hammadi and some of the Dead Sea Scroll texts as well, but focus more like towards the Gnostic versions of things. The Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas, other of those that were gone for 1900 years. There's a reason why they were gone for 1900 years. Look to the East. There is so much wisdom in the East. Yes, look at Taoism. Taoism, is just full of truths about how the universe works. The same thing with many other traditions. It's when we cross-study and we expose ourselves to many different philosophies out there, many different lines of thinking, that all of a sudden we could see there's universal truths that are universal, don't belong to just one little tribe. Why would the one source of everything, which means billions and billions, countless, trillions, an infinite number of stars, an infinite number of planets, why would that source pick one little tribe to say that's my tribe? It makes no sense. Who told you that? Well, they did. What? Use your minds, use your heart, learn discernment. Doesn't mean that there's not amazing people and saints in every world religion, because there are. There are people we can definitely call saints that come out of Catholicism, different Protestant uh, ideologies as well. There's 30,000 different versions of Christianity, and there's several versions of Islam as well. There are people that are so devout, they only want to do the right thing, and they do the right thing day in and day out. It's because their souls want to do the right thing. It's not because they have the right ideology, the right dogma. Again, we're to come out of this as we move into a new age. It won't be, and many people are terrified of that term, new age. Well, it's because you've been imprinted and indoctrinated to be in fear of a term that's actually biblical. And that just comes from a lack of understanding. And why do we harp on this? Because ultimately, they've set Christianity and Islam to have another great war. And yes, there are going to be other major players, including China and Russia and many others. This is going to be a global conflict. But while the leadership may profess a certain belief system, don't believe it. They know how the universe really works. And they know it's all about controlling the minds. So we had talked about this. Biden threatens legal action on masks in schools as feud with DeSantis intensifies. this is clear. We have the beginnings of the breakdown of this country. And this is horrible. This is people walking along, and they have to just all jump in a ditch. This is over in Afghanistan because they started to be raked with gunfire. How are Americans and Afghans supposed to get through this to make it to the airport? It feels like there could be some sort of major tragedy or multiples that happen that are going to incite the public again to the point where they're willing to do anything because they're so angry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most definitely. This is how they do it. They understand how people are going to behave in groups, how they understand how people are going to behave with certain stimuli. They understand people's hearts and minds, and they use it to manipulate, just like a cattle rancher might understand how cattle are going to react. This is what they do to us. They know what we're going to do before we do, and they take advantage of that. And we have to remember that all the time.
The vast majority of humans on this planet are controlled by their ego, and the ego is all about survival. So, how do they play to the ego? Well, many different ways: pride, fear, jealousy. There's so many different ways to play to a person's ego. For instance, if you were getting beaten up all the time by the school bully, and then there's a new kid that comes in, and you see this new kid looks like he can seriously kick some ass. Maybe the school bully goes to pick on the new kid, and the new kid just puts him in place really quick. Then you might go over to the new kid, and you might be like, hey, that was impressive. And you might try to butter him up to get him on your side so that the bully doesn't keep picking on you. When we look to the politicians, look to their speeches. Are they dealing with ego? Are they saying, I did this, I did that, I am great, I am wonderful, look what I have done? And when there's failings, that was them, that was the previous administration, that was this person, that person, that's, whatever it is, their egos won't allow them to say I'm wrong. They'll always prey on other people's egos. The two, I should say, the two that have stuck out to me, and nobody's perfect, are Ron Paul and Rand Paul, because they're the only ones I've ever heard that actually sound semi-intelligent and like they're not operating from ego. And obviously, in the system itself, it's set up so that the system polices itself, and people can't get too far. So, how far can they go? Well, as far as they could go without not being here tomorrow. And that's the bottom line. This is an old speech he did back in 2011, which basically said, if we don't get out now, we'll be there for another 10 years. Guess what? We were there for another 10 years. And one of the reasons why I like both of them is they would pull all of our military in. They would stop us being used, the United States, as the police force for the CABAL, because that's what's happened. And now the powers that be have shifted, and they want a new police force out there, CHINA, C period, C period, P period style. In actuality, what we have gotten is that they're already in power. And we're talking about C period, C period, P period. In many places, in many ways, they're already the power structure in some places that you might think are free, but are not really free.
Right. They got their foot in the door. That's kind of what the information coming through is they're getting their foot in the door wherever they can. So when things look suspicious, they don't seem quite right, they don't sound quite right, that's them.
Yes, which we've known for a long time. Not even tanks can stop a large wave of Afghan refugees heading to Europe. Is this going to be another crisis? And while most definitely there are poor people that have lost everything, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, these countries that have been in constant strife, it's sad and it's a travesty. And most of the refugees are truly refugees. Some are not really refugees. Some are what we might call Well, they go to the highest bidder, if you know what I mean. And, again, infiltration. Well, we've gotten two from the GF. If you guys have been with us a while, you know what the GF is. The second letter after G is A and then L, right? Is that there are waves of people coming in right now, heading to Europe, heading to the US, all different nationalities, all different creeds, all different colors, but the same purpose. And that purpose we'll see manifest. And it's exactly what, exactly what is very, very troubling. As we've talked about these sleepy, small units that are going to be waking up shortly. And again, it could be that in reality, what happens was caused by people from a certain place that was not from here, not from the US of A, but perhaps the impression is it was, if you know what I mean. I think that you guys can understand that. Most can. Afghanistan war, unpopular amid chaotic pull out. Actually, 2/3 of Americans, and it really should be 99% of people that were awake, were not for the Afghanistan war. And we talked about what crop is there in yesterday's video and how that has caused a lot of even worse conditions since the US and NATO have been in control of that area. And then we see 35 missing. The number, what I had seen from one source, is down to 20, but they do have 2 confirmed lost. And this is in North Carolina, and this is in my old county too. As I was living in Clyde, North Carolina, and Waynesville area, beautiful area, lovely people. Kind of a second or third home for me. Definitely, it's one of the places I felt the most comfortable, although I could see there's going to be strong earth change issues even there. And, the Appalachians are thought to be one of the safer zones, but, I was out on the porch having coffee with a friend, and I heard part of the mountain on the backside go down after some heavy rains, and that was kind of making me itchy to be somewhere where the mountains weren't right on top of you, as you will see lots of things like what we just saw happen. It's really, really sad. One person in Florida lost their life too from the flooding, caused an accident. And this is Haywood County, Canton, Crusoe, Clyde. Record flooding on the Pigeon River, which, I would drive over that all the time. Severe, severe. One of our dear friends said that an old neighbor of theirs had to actually tie himself to a tree for 6 hours as the water was rushing all around him. His house was totally swept away, totally swept away. But he survived because he tied himself to a tree. So, I mean, think about that clarity of mind. Very, very sad. 10 people had taken refuge in an emergency shelter in a school building in Waynesville. 10 to 15 bridges damaged or destroyed. Other counties that were affected, I should say, Jackson, McDowell, Madison, Mitchell, Rutherford, Transylvania, and Yancey, all declared local states of emergency. Transylvania County has, I believe, the most waterfalls in the whole country. Absolutely gorgeous area. So we pray for all our friends and family over in that area. And we see over in Ghana, roads, bridges, homes destroyed. This is a global thing that we're seeing. You're either facing wildfires or you're facing floods. And just think about how quick, if mankind wasn't constantly rebuilding, the times that we're going in, 100 years later, how many signs of mankind would be around, right? Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, we have a new vent opening at, where was this again, son?
That was in a frog's jail.
Frog jail.
Frog doll's jaw. You got it.
Fagra Dalshfajal. Fagra Dalshfajal.
Yes.
Fagra Dalshfajal.
Frog's jail for short.
So, this is a really curious one. They have a new vent. This has been erupting for a while. Iceland, definitely one to watch. And it was voted one of the safest places, believe it or not, to ride out these times, along with New Zealand and Australia. And, so many of the elite have been buying up Australia and New Zealand land out there. And it's interesting to see, too, that that's one of the hardest impacted places as far as, the LOCK down. Hurricane Grace makes landfall near Mexico's Tulum temples. Cozumel, Cancun. This is obviously one of the vacation capitals of the world. Playa del Carmen, absolutely gorgeous. Category 1 storm hit. Currently, it's a tropical storm at 65-mile-an-hour winds. It's going to reemerge over the Gulf and become a Category 1 again, probably. We'll have to see what they do and which way they want to influence the wind to blow. Meanwhile, there's another one. This is Henry, and this is going to get pretty close to Cape Cod. So keep an eye on that up in New England, as this is an interesting one to follow as we see the track. So most definitely you're going to get waves and beach erosion. You could have some flooding that happens up in New England. Watch out, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and up into Maine, and then up into Nova Scotia after that. Meanwhile, as we had talked about, Tropical Storm Grace causes floods in Haiti and Dominican Republic, and over 2,200 lives were lost in the quake. They're still going on trying to find people. Hundreds of homes damaged by floods, over 500 damaged by floods, as Thor is bowling up there again. So this is just insult to industry. This is just
injury.
Insult to injury after this earthquake. Now we have the storms ongoing. And how about Minneapolis? Minnesota has imposed water restrictions as the drought worsens. Our brother Ben had sent me some photos showing just how brown everything is. So, this is how far the drought is extending, all the way over into Minnesota as well. 60% of the state's streams and rivers are flowing at or near record lows. And of course, in the West, unfortunately, it's getting worse and worse and worse. And the fall forecast for the West is to be hotter than normal. So this is probably going to aggravate those situations. As far as the East, basically around normal temperatures, and Southeast, more south central east can be a little bit below normal temperatures. And it was interesting too, because there was one spot which is very reminiscent of what happened when we saw that big freeze in Texas and Oklahoma that has the likelihood for very low temperatures. I wonder, are we going to see some replays? We talked about that underwater volcano that shot ash 50,000 feet up in the air. Well, it did make a new island, by the way. But this has happened before in 1904, 1914, and 86, and all of them ended up being eroded away. But these are different times, and there will be some new land out there. And this is, to me, creepy as hell. This extremely dexterous Atlas robot performing parkour. There's two of them. They are as nimble as a typical person. I don't know how fast they can run, but they could kind of do everything we can do in an athletic point of way. I wonder how strong they are. Now, these are 5 foot tall. Can you imagine if they made some of these 10 feet tall or 15 feet tall? Can you imagine if they armed these things and put them on the streets when people perhaps have woken up to the point where, they're refusing to go into certain services? Well, this feels like this would be what we would see. As we had shared when we were leaving Vegas, and that was leaving Vegas for the first time with the camper in tow, or for the last time, I should say, we went by a tractor trailer that had 4 of those dog-shaped Boston Dynamics type of things on them that were the size of like a 3500 series truck. Close to the size of like an armored vehicle or a tank. But they were like those dogs. It was disconcerting to say the least. This is the next generation. RoboCop is going to be here. We can expect to coexist with robots that move with grace, reliability, and work alongside humans to enrich our lives. Yes. Mm-hmm. Comply. Comply.
Well, as soon as, they realize that humans are going to stop going against each other, that's when they need these guys to step in.
Exactly. And nearly half Americans worry they'll never have another pain-free day in their lives. A new study asked 2,000 Americans about their daily experience and impact on their life in dealing with aches and pains, along with finding that 48% believe they'll never have a pain-free day again. That's depressing. That's sad. And so many changes can be had just through lifestyle changes. And it was interesting. They found that basically the average person has about 14 pain-free days a year. That's adults. That's sad. But so much of it is our lifestyle choices. And again, when we're at the store, we look very odd compared to most people. Now, I did go out because, the last 3 times we talked to the Galactics, they were stressing things are really close. Things are really close. Things are really close. So be ready again to be basically, okay, well, I mean, I've been reading things out of New Zealand and Australia where you cannot leave your house. They're on lockdown to that point. You can't leave your house, period. Well, what if that lasts 6 months? Can you handle it? And that's where we are right now. And that's why I went out and just didn't worry about what I was spending. We'll figure things out later on, as far as budgets and all. But also the way things are getting more and more expensive, we did go out and get different things that might be multifaceted. Like for instance, in a pinch, I bought a whole bunch of different canned proteins that in the worst case scenario, we just simply end up feeding them to the dogs instead of buying a whole bunch of dog food. That could be their food. And we do have a lot of rice, beans, and lentils that should last 2 years. So augmenting that with some cans of protein, we'll get by, and that type of thing. Because everything is only going to get to be more expensive when it comes to food. Mm-hmm. And again, we might only be days away or weeks away from major events that keep us from even going to the store. So be aware of that. But as far as when you look at different people's shopping carts when you're at the store, you could tell the people that have a lot of pain by the way they move, for one. And you look at their shopping carts and it's loaded with cans of soda. It's loaded with processed foods, all sorts of things that are just making them miserable, more and more miserable, more full of pain, more unable to focus. Again, you want to eat real foods that don't have like yellow dye number, whatever, that don't have monosodium glutamate in them, that don't have carrageenan in them, that don't have all these cancer causing items in them. And many people will say, I can't afford to buy organic.
And even when you are getting things, and if it looks like, well, the only thing in this bag is shrimp, look at the ingredients anyway. Look anyway.
Exactly. Because, there was a great deal out on like catfish, for instance, that was locally farmed, which always feels good to me, depending on where you're living, as long as your streams aren't glowing. But then when I looked at all the additives and preservatives, it's like, nope, you got to pass up that good, deal, because I'm not going to put that into my system, because all it's going to do is create an inflammatory autoimmune response. And so when people say, I can't afford to eat clean, how can you afford to not eat clean? Ask yourself honestly too, could I lose a few pounds? Because there are people that would be defined as obese, chronically obese, that are nutritionally deficient. And that could be corrected pretty quickly if you have, you know, if you give the body the right things, like, start to have a daily large organic salad, it won't really cost you so much. We don't need as many calories as we think. Like if you take in a supersized number one, that's kind of like all the calories you would need for the entire day. Yet it's not giving you hardly any of the nutrition you need. This is the type of thing that you're going to need to survive this perfect storm that we're in. And many of you guys have figured it out. Hot dogs shorten your healthy life by 36 minutes. You eat a hot dog, you're going to technically, it'll work out so that you're losing 36 minutes of your life for that hot dog. Right. Now, if you ate a serving of cashews, you might have extended it by 26 minutes. That's a 62-minute swing. That's an hour. So you're going to go and reach for a hot dog. Think about that. How many times a week do you eat a hot dog? Well, maybe just 2. Or maybe it's more. Maybe it's 4. Well, times that out. So say you ate, 4 of them a week, 28. That's 28 hours. That's a day you're losing a month. And if you switch it to cashews, you would actually be gaining more time. It's amazing the difference that food makes. As I watch a branch just go falling off a tree in the distance there, pretty big branch too. Fruits, real things, real food. Fruits, vegetables, nuts, legumes, some seafoods can result in major benefits. But pulling away from beef and processed meats. And, I took a peek just for ha-has at this one brand of turkey that was nitrate free and yet had carrageenan in it. Carrageenan is a known cancer causer. Why do they put that in there? There's no real reason for it to be in there. They'll say texture or something. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, is it worth it?
Is it worth it? You got to read labels. You have to read labels. Again, you don't have to go the full vegan, and there are people that are vehemently vegan, and anything else is an atrocity. But just look at what you're eating. Just look at what you're eating. And then there's some people with certain blood types that might have certain conditions that might stay vegan, but they could actually benefit from maybe the oils and some, fish and things like that too. So you have to really adjust and listen to your intuition as well as what comes from your heart spiritually. Because ultimately, if you're eating something that you feel really bad about, even if it might be okay for your body, because you feel really bad about it, it might not have a good effect on your body.
Right.
So that's key too.
Mm-hmm.
So we just wanted to share that with you guys because we could always do better as far as our diet for the most part. And it's critical in these times. So thank you for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. Thanks for being part of the family. We are most definitely in the times where we need to be prepared to the highest degree. Thanks for your support. Also, with everybody that's been checking out and trying medicinal foods, again, the feedback has been really 100% positive. Have not heard one thing, not one negative comment, period. Besides maybe, hey, they were out of this. That's the only thing I've heard is something sold out, and hopefully they'll get it in again shortly. As always, guys, God bless and namaste.
Namaste.